Hello. So decimal tenths are the divisions between whole numbers. It's how we describe when we weigh something or when we time something, and it's between whole numbers. Whole numbers are what we use when we count 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. 10 is a whole number, 12, 20, all whole numbers. But there are divisions between them, and we call them tenths. So here is a number line. Here's 0 and 1. So these are whole numbers right here and here. And there are little divisions between them. There's 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10. And those describe little parts between the whole numbers. And if we were to mark them on the lower number line, there's 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, 6/10, 7/10, 8/10, 9/10. And these are the divisions between 0 and 1. So from 0 to here, we would describe that as 6/10. 0 decimal 6, or if we were to write it, it is 6/10. For the grade 5s, we take tenths. Here's 1/10. So this is between 0 and 1/10. And if we were to continue going this way, we would get 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, all the way up to 1. And I'm just going to change this. This should be 1/10 right there. So the grade 5s, we're dividing tenths into even smaller divisions. So hundredths are the tiny divisions between the tenths. Right here, you can see hundredths. The first decimal place is a 0, and then you have hundredths. So 1/10 can be split into 1/100th, 2/100ths, 3/100ths, 4/100ths, 5/100ths, and so on. So this part right here is 1, 2, 3/100ths. We write this, there's 0 holes. We don't have a whole tenth yet. This is 1/10, but we have 3/100ths. And the way you would write that is 3/100ths. And the TH at the end is very important. It's not 300ths, it's 300ths, very small pieces. We can represent our hundredths and our tenths using base 10 blocks, except they mean something else now. A 1 is one of the flat hundreds blocks. This represents one whole. And so if we have 2 of them, we have 2 wholes, or 2 whole numbers, or just the number 2. And then we have the decimal, and then we have tenths and hundredths. So tenths, you can see that 10 of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, make a 1 whole. And then hundredths, 10 of these make up a tenth. So if we have just one of those, we would call this 1/100th, or no ones, no tenths, 1/100th. And it takes 100 of these to make one whole. So we can use this as a place value chart. So if I have three ones and 2/10, and it would look like 1, 2, 3, the decimal, and then 1, 2/10. 3 wholes and 2/10. I have no hundreds. It says 3.2. What we could change this to is there's a blank right here. There's no hundredths. We could have a 0 there. So 3.3 decimal 20 is the exact same thing as 3.2. There's just no hundreds, so I'm not going to bring any down. And the way that we say this in words is 3 and 2/10. 3 and 2/10. And we don't even have to talk about the hundredths. Let's try another one. Let's try decimal 45 hundredths. Decimal 45 hundredths. If I'm starting with the word decimal, that means there are 0 ones. Decimal 45 hundredths. 45 hundredths. What this would look like is 0 here, because we have no ones. And then tenths, we have 4 of them. So I'm going to grab 1/10, another tenth, 3/10, 4/10, and then 5 hundredths. So I'll start bringing down, if I can, some hundredths. So some technical difficulties. So I have 4/10 and 5 hundredths, and that's what it would look like. And what we could do over here is just put a big 0. There are no ones. 4/10, 5 hundredths, and what we call this is 45 hundredths. The reason it's 45 hundredths is because really this is the smallest that we're counting is hundredths, and we have 10, 20, 30, 40, 5 hundredths, 45 hundredths. Let's try another number. Let's try 2.03. How would we say this? Well, there are 2 ones. I'm going to bring some ones down. There are 2 ones. Then we have our decimal. We have no tenths. So I'm going to just write a 0. We have no tenths in this one, but we do have 3 hundredths. Not sure if I have enough hundredths here. There we go, 3 hundredths. So we have 2 wholes, no tenths, and 3 hundredths. The way we would say this number is 2 and. The decimal, when we say things, is always and. So 2 and 3 hundredths, and that's what we have. Now let's look at 2 numbers that get kind of confusing. This is for the grade 5s. What about the numbers 1.6 and 1.06? So this one is 1 and 6/10. So I could show that by 1 and 6/10, 1.6. What about 1.06 or 1 and 6 hundredths? I'm going to write that in our place value chart. It's 1 whole, decimal, no tenths, but 6 hundredths. So if I was to compare these 2 numbers, this one has 6/10. So that means, there we go, we have 6/10 in the top one, and here we only have 6 hundredths. So 6 hundredths is much less than 6/10. 6/10 we have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 hundredths. If each one of these is a hundredth, we have 60 here and only 6 here. So this number, 1.6, 1.6, or 1 and 6/10, is much larger than 1 and 6 hundredths. So the ways we have to represent our decimal numbers are base 10 blocks, words, numbers, and then using a place value chart. So looking at what we have up top, we have some base 10 blocks. I see a 1, 2/10, and 1/100th. And the decimal I know goes between the 1 and the tenths. In words, that would be 1 and 21 hundredths. Remember, it's 21 hundredths because we name them by what the smallest is we're counting. So there's 21 hundredths. In numbers, we would say it's 1 and 21 hundredths. In a place value chart, we have 1 1, 2 tenths, and 1 hundredths. And those are the different ways we can represent this number.